أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. In today's discussion, we will be examining tradition 1.1.2, which is the second hadith or tradition in Kitab al-Aqli wal-Jahl, the book of intellect and foolishness. So in the book of al-Kafi that you have, if you turn to page 8, you will find the second tradition in the book of foolishness and intellect. Page number 8. Whenever we examine a hadith, as a scholar, you would examine the chain of the hadith. Who is the one who narrates this hadith for us? Is the path to this hadith a reliable path or not? That is the first thing that a scholar does. One of the clues that determine whether a hadith is authentic or not is the path to that hadith, the chain of narrators. So let's examine the chain of narrators. The hadith starts with Ali ibn Muhammad. Ali ibn Muhammad, who is he? He is the teacher of al-Collini. That is obvious, we know that. How? Because al-Collini is narrating this hadith from him. So he's one of the teachers of al-Collini, the author of this book is al-Collini. So he is his teacher. Now Ali ibn Muhammad, there were several people at that time who were the teachers of al-Collini by this name, Ali ibn Muhammad. He doesn't give us his last name. We have two Ali ibn Muhammad. One of them is Ibn Bindar, Ali ibn Muhammad ibn Bindar, and the other one is Allan. So how do we know which Ali ibn Muhammad is this? For us to know whether he was reliable or not. One way to distinguish who this Ali ibn Muhammad is to examine the narrator after him. Ali ibn Muhammad, who does he narrate the hadith from? That's a clue that will determine which Ali ibn Muhammad is this. Because when you read about the life of Ali ibn Muhammad, Ibn Bindar has his own teachers, Allan has his own teachers. So from his teacher you can determine which Ali ibn Muhammad he's referring to. So he narrates this hadith, Ali ibn Muhammad, he narrates this hadith from who? An Sahl ibn Ziyad, from a man by the name of Sahl, the son of Ziyad. When you examine the biography of Ali ibn Muhammad, Ibn Bindar and Allan, we see that it is Allan the one who narrates from Sahl ibn Ziyad usually. That is one clue that tells us Ali ibn Muhammad here is who? Allan, not Ibn Bindar. Why? Because he narrates the hadith from Sahl ibn Ziyad, and Sahl ibn Ziyad was one of the teachers of Allan, Muhammad ibn Ali Allan. Now was he, Allan, was he thiqah? Was he reliable, trustworthy or not? When we look at his biography, we see that yes, he was a reliable narrator. So Ali ibn Muhammad, we don't have an issue with. He is a reliable narrator. And we were able to distinguish whether he is Ibn Bindar or Allan. How were we able to distinguish that?
From his teacher.
From his teacher. Who's who? Who's his teacher?
Ziyad.
Sahl ibn Ziyad. From his teacher, we were able to distinguish that. Is that clear? How we were able to distinguish him? From his teacher. So Ali ibn Muhammad, we don't have an issue with. He's reliable. He narrates this hadith from Sahl ibn Ziyad. Sahl ibn Ziyad is one of the most disputed narrators that our scholars have debated and discussed. Many of our scholars consider him to be unreliable. Some scholars consider him to be reliable. And there is a reason for that. Sahl ibn Ziyad, when we examine his biography, we see that al-Shaykh al-Tusi, how do you know that Sahl ibn Ziyad is reliable or not? You go to the books of al-Shaykh al-Tusi. He has two books. One of them is the Fihrist, and the other one is al-Rijal. Two books in which he gives us the biography of the companions of the Imams. So we see that al-Shaykh al-Tusi, in his book al-Rijal, he says that Sahl ibn Ziyad is reliable. But in his book al-Fihrist, he says ضعيف, he's weak. So now you have a contradiction in the books of who? Al-Shaykh al-Tusi himself. In one of his research, he says he's reliable. Then he came to the conclusion that, you know what? He's not reliable. You go to An-Najashi. An-Najashi was an expert in biographies. In his books, he would talk about the companions of the Imams. He would tell you what books did they write, what was their standing, were they trustworthy, were they reliable or not. An-Najashi is more accurate than Shaykh al-Tusi. Why? Shaykh al-Tusi was an encyclopedia. He had books in every field. Islamic law, jurisprudence, the science of biographies, theology. He was so busy with all these fields, whereas you see An-Najashi specialized mainly in what? In the biographies. So he had more time to research each narrator. That's why scholars today, they consider An-Najashi to be more accurate than Al-Shaykh al-Tusi, because he was really an expert in his field. We still accept the testimony of Al-Shaykh al-Tusi, but An-Najashi is more accurate. What does An-Najashi say about Sahl ibn Ziyad? An-Najashi says about Sahl ibn Ziyad that he was a liar. He was considered to be a liar, and he's not trustworthy. So that's one indication that Sahl ibn Ziyad is not trustworthy. There is another indication, and this one's interesting. In the city of Qom, you had a man by the name of Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Isa. He was the first scholar to settle in Qom. We're talking about 1,000 years ago, when Qom was not really a city. This scholar, he settled in Qom, and his last name is Al-Ash'ari Al-Qummi. He was very strict. If he would see a narrator narrating hadiths that he considered not to be reliable, do you know what he would do? He would exile you from that city. He was like the gatekeeper of Qom. And one of the people whom he excommunicated, exiled, was Sahl ibn Ziyad. He told him, Sahl, get out of Qom. I don't allow you to stay here and narrate hadiths, because a lot of the hadiths you narrate are dubious. You narrate from weird narrators. You have weird sources. So this is one indication that Sahl ibn Ziyad maybe could not be trusted. Now you could be thinking, wait a minute, with what I've said, then why do some scholars today consider him to be reliable? Why is there a dispute then? The primary reason why there was a dispute was that apparently when we read about the biography of Sahl ibn Ziyad, it appears that he had a problem with his beliefs. He was deviant in terms of beliefs. He had some weird beliefs that the scholars of the time would not accept. Now, because they considered him to be deviant in his beliefs, they excommunicated him and they considered him to be not reliable. So it's not that he was a liar. Scholars say, no, he was truthful, but he did not have the best of beliefs. He had some devious ideas. You know, his aqeedah, his beliefs were not the best of beliefs. So that's why those scholars excommunicated him, because of his aqeedah. Otherwise he was reliable. And when it comes to accepting a hadith, do we care about the person's belief? Or are concerned about is that he's reliable or not. If a non-Muslim comes to you, a non-Muslim who doesn't have the correct belief, right? If a non-Muslim comes to you and he narrates something to you, but you know based on your research, based on your experience, that this non-Muslim person is reliable, he's trustworthy, would you accept his report? Yes, you would. You go to a doctor who's not a Muslim. A doctor will tell you, I've diagnosed you and you have this illness and you need this medicine. Do you trust him? He's not Muslim. Why do you trust him? Doesn't matter. Reliability and being trustworthy doesn't really have to do with your faith, what you believe in. You could go to a person who has no religion, who's a professional. But if you can trust that person, then you could take their word, even if their aqeedah is corrupt, even if their aqeedah is fasid. Now, in the past, 1,000 years ago, this was not agreed upon by all scholars. Some scholars were strict. They would say, I would only take the hadith of the one who is Shi'i Ithna Ashari, a full Shia who has all the correct beliefs. But later scholars are like, no, that's not necessary. As long as that person is reliable, we'll take his hadith. So one indication that he was probably trustworthy is that they had a problem with his beliefs. Otherwise, he was what? Trustworthy. Another clue, we find his name in the book of Kafi. Do you know in how many hadiths we find Sahl ibn Ziyad? In 1,740 hadiths. That's 10% of Kafi. That's more than 10%. 11% of the book of Kafi, of the hadiths we have in this book, are through who? Sahl ibn Ziyad. Now al-Collini was an expert. Al-Collini was far closer to the time of Sahl ibn Ziyad than these later scholars. So al-Collini must have had clues that Sahl ibn Ziyad was reliable for him to narrate close to 2,000 hadiths from Sahl. Most of the hadiths that al-Collini narrates from Sahl is through one of his teachers. Sometimes he narrates from him directly. So I would trust al-Collini, who's an expert, who says in the introduction of al-Kafi that I've only brought these hadiths which I believe are correct between me and Allah. He was pious. He's not going to get me 2,000 hadiths from someone who was a liar. So what is that an indication of? That Sahl ibn Ziyad, regardless of what his faith was, he was trustworthy. And hence you have an expert like al-Collini who has depended on him in the book of al-Kafi. That tells you that Sahl ibn Ziyad was probably trustworthy. But this is a debate among scholars. Many of them consider him to be not trustworthy. Some do accept him. Now if we say that Sahl ibn Ziyad is not reliable, does that automatically mean that the hadith is not valid? No. Because as we said, one way to determine if a hadith is correct is to look at the chain. There are other clues. You have to look at the content. Maybe as Shaykh al-Collini, when he narrated this hadith from Sahl ibn Ziyad, he had the book of the companion. We talked about those 400 Usul, al-Arba'mi'ah, right? Those 400 books of the companions of the Imams. Maybe al-Collini had access to that manuscript, and he actually found this hadith in that manuscript. But he's just telling us that I also heard this hadith from my teacher, from Sahl ibn Ziyad. So you can't automatically say this hadith is weak. So Sahl ibn Ziyad, who does he narrate this hadith from? Amr ibn Uthman. Amr ibn Uthman was a Kufan man from Kufa, and he is reliable. Who does he narrate it from? An Mufaddal ibn Salih. Mufaddal ibn Salih, one of the companions of the Imam, he was not reliable. Scholars do consider him to be not reliable, and he was known for lying. Now you could say, okay, why does Collini give us his hadith? Because maybe al-Collini, he has the book of that companion who comes before Mufaddal ibn Salih. Collini already has his book. It doesn't matter now how he got this hadith verbally and orally, as long as he had the book, you just open the book and you read this hadith. Just like the book of Kafi. Today you can open the book of Kafi because it's a well-known book. It doesn't matter how you got this book. You could have a teacher who's not reliable who gave you the book of Kafi, but as long as you have the book and you're an expert, that suffices. But Mufaddal ibn Salih was not reliable. Who does he narrate it from? An Sa'd ibn Tarif. Sa'd ibn Tarif is also disputed. Why? Because of his aqeedah, because of his faith. Because he was corrupt in his faith, some scholars would consider him to be reliable, others would consider him not to be reliable. So that's also disputed. It really depends on your own personal research. Who does he narrate the hadith from? An al-Asbagh ibn Nabata. Al-Asbagh ibn Nabata was one of the close companions of who? Does anyone know? Imam Ali alayhi salam. He was one of the best companions of the Imam alayhi salam. Al-Asbagh ibn Nabata, initially he was from Yemen. He migrates to Kufa. He lives with the Imam alayhi salam when the Imam was in Kufa. And he was really a warrior. He participated in many of the battles with Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, defending the truth. And he was even courageous. One hadith tells us once Al-Asbagh ibn Nabata was in the presence of Muawiyah. This was after the martyrdom of Imam Ali, after he was killed. Abu Hurairah was also there. Now Abu Hurairah, he went and he pledged his allegiance to Bani Umayyah. He had a good relationship with Muawiyah. Al-Asbagh ibn Nabata tells him, "Oh Abu Hurairah, I want to ask you a question." And this is in the presence of who? Of Muawiyah, who was the Umayyad, ruler at the time, who fought Imam Ali alayhi salam, the father of Yazid. Al-Asbagh tells Abu Hurairah in the presence of Muawiyah, he tells him, "Oh Abu Hurairah, you are a companion of the Prophet. Did you attend the event of Ghadir Khum?" He says, "Yes, I did." He asks him, "Can you tell us what you heard from the Prophet when he said something about Imam Ali?" He said, "Yes, I witnessed that the Prophet says, Man kuntu mawlah, fahadha aliyun mawlah. Whomever I am his leader, I have authority over, then Imam Ali alayhi salam is his leader. He has authority over him. Allahumma wali man wala. Oh Allah, befriend the one who follows Ali. Wa'adi man ada. And be an enemy to the one who is an enemy of Ali." Abu Hurairah witnesses that he heard this. Then Al-Asbagh ibn Nabata, he tells him, "Oh Abu Hurairah, then why do I see you? You have befriended the enemy of God," meaning Muawiyah, "and you've abandoned the friend of God," meaning Imam Ali. At that point, Abu Hurairah was so impacted by these words, he breathes heavily and he says, "Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un." To Allah we belong and to Him we shall return. He realized his mistake. So Al-Asbagh was a great companion, and so we trust him. Now this hadith, if you want to classify, for the purpose of classifying the hadith, is this hadith now strong or weak? If we just want to classify it. It's not strong. Why? Because Mufaddal ibn Salih was not reliable. So this hadith, we call it da'if. In the science of hadith, this is a hadith that is da'if, it's weak. Does that mean that it's false? No. It just means that this chain is not a chain we could depend on. We have to look for other clues to verify if the hadith is correct or not. We have to compare it to other hadiths, see if there are other sources for it, look at the content. Is the content reasonable? Does it agree with other hadith? Does it agree with the Holy Quran? Because some people misunderstand this today. Some people will say, "Okay, this hadith is da'if, throw it away." No, you can't just throw away a hadith because the chain is not reliable for us. Al-Collini had many clues that he gathered in order to deliver to us these hadiths. So this hadith, if you just want to classify it, it's a da'if hadith, it's a weak hadith. But that does not automatically mean it's a false hadith. It could be a true hadith. And it is a true hadith when we look at the content of it. And there are clues that tell us this hadith is correct. So this is what a scholar does. If a scholar wants to issue a fatwa, he looks at the chain. If the chain is reliable, okay, that's a very good clue that this hadith is reliable and you could depend on it. But if the chain is weak, you have to do more research and figure out other clues, other indications, whether the hadith is accepted or not. So the sanad of this hadith, the sanad is weak, not the content of the hadith. The hadith itself is not weak. What's weak here? The sanad. And the sanad means what? The chain. The chain of narrators is weak, but the content is acceptable. And we'll read the hadith now. So let's begin by analyzing the hadith. Al-Asbagh ibn Nabata, he narrates this hadith from who? An Aliyin alayhi salam, from Imam Ali alayhi salam. So this hadith ends at Imam Ali alayhi salam. Now it's interesting that Al-Collini came about 300 years after Imam Ali, in the 4th century, early 4th century. But if you look at the generations between him and Imam Ali, you find that he narrates it from Ali ibn Muhammad, 1, Sahl ibn Ziyad, 2, Amr ibn Uthman, 3, Mufaddal ibn Salih, 4, Sa'd ibn Tarif, 5, Asbagh ibn Nabata, 6. So through 6 narrators we reach Imam Ali alayhi salam. That's 300 years. So this is interesting about this hadith, that Al-Collini has 6 links to Imam Ali alayhi salam. So let's read this hadith. The hadith says, هَبَطَ جِبْرَائِيل عَلَىٰ آدَمْ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. Jibreel, the great angel of God, he descends on who? On Adam, peace be upon him. Now when did this happen? We don't exactly know. But scholars have 2 opinions. Some say as soon as Allah created Adam, this happened. Some other scholars say no. When we examine the clues, it seems that when Adam was brought down to earth, he was in the Garden of Eden. Then when he and his wife approached that tree, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought them down to earth. For 100 years he cried. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave him for what he did. It was not technically a sin. That's something we can discuss in theology. But he made a mistake. He did not take the advice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So after Allah brought him down to earth and he repented, this incident happened. Jibreel comes down to him. What does he tell him? فَقَالَ, Jibreel said, Ya Adam, O Adam, إِنِّي أُمِرْتُ, I have been commanded, أَنْ أُخَيِّرَكَ وَاحِدَةً مِّن ثَلَاثٍ, I've been commanded to have you choose one of 3. I have 3 things to offer you. You have to choose one of these 3. Okay, what are they? فَاخْتَرْهَا, so choose that one. وَدَعْ اثْنَتَيْنِ, and leave the other 2. You can only choose one. فَقَالَ لَهُ يَا آدَمْ, Adam told him, Ya Jibreel, وَمَا الثَّلَاثِ, what are these 3? Explain them to me. فَقَالَ, Jibreel said, الْعَقْلُ وَالْحَيَاءُ وَالدِّينُ. These are 3 things that we see Jibreel alayhi salam offering Adam. Let's examine these 3, because it's very important for us to realize the role of the aql, the intellect. So the first is what? Al-aql, which is what? Intellect. The second is what? Al-haya. It has many translations, but let's call it decency for now. It could be also translated as modesty. And the third one is what? Ad-deen. What is ad-deen? Devotion. Religion. Let's call it devotion for now, because that's a better translation for deen. So we see that Jibreel tells Adam there are 3. Al-aql, the intellect, al-haya, decency. And the third one is ad-din, devotion. Choose one of them. What is the meaning of the intellect? What is the aql? The aql is that power, that intellectual capacity that allows you to see good from bad, good from evil. It gives you that vision to know what is right from what is wrong, and guides you to do that which is right, and protects you from doing that which is wrong. This is the aql very briefly. What about the other two? Haya. Haya means decency. What is decency? Decency is a power that protects you from doing anything indecent, anything ugly, right? Anything looked down upon, anything shameful. That's why another translation for haya is shame. When someone has shame, we say that they have haya. So it's that power, that inhibition, which protects you from doing something indecent, something shameful, any shameful act. And devotion, deen, is that power in you, the human being, that pushes you to worship God, to do that which is good. When you are devoted to something, you believe that this is a good cause, so you go and work for it. You're devoted to that cause. This is deen. When we say religion, people who are religious, what does that mean? People who think they're doing good, they're working hard, they're devoting themselves to a path, and they're worshiping God. When you want to worship God, that's called deen, religion, devotion. So Jibreel tells Adam, choose one of these three. God is offering you one of these three. Choose them. If you take aql, these two will depart. If you take haya, deen and aql will depart. If you take deen, those two will depart. What does Adam do? Let's continue the hadith to see what Adam alayhi salam does. فَقَالَ آدَمْ إِنِّي قَدْ اخْتَرْتُ الْعَقْلَ. Adam says, I have chosen the intellect. فَقَالَ جِبْرَائِيل لِلْحَيَاءِ وَالدِّينِ. So Jibreel, after hearing the response from Adam, he addressed haya, decency, and deen, devotion. Now this is symbolic. You know, let's say you have haya embodied in a form. Let's just assume that. So it was a symbolic interaction that Jibreel commanded these two. Decency, if you can picture decency in a form, Jibreel spoke to that form. So Jibreel tells decency, haya, and deen, which is religion, insarifa, okay, go. Because he's chosen which one? Intellect. What did he choose? He chose the intellect. So you two leave. Now what happened? This is interesting. فَقَالَ يَا جِبْرَائِيل. Both of them said decency and religion or devotion. They said, oh Jibreel, we have been commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to never ever depart from the aql, to never separate from the aql. God instructed us, wherever the intellect is, wherever the aql is, you have to stick to it. You can't depart the intellect. قَالَ فَشَأْنُكُمَا. Jibreel says, okay, if that's the case, then stay there. And he went back up. Now this is a very interesting hadith. Let's try to explore it to see the role of aql, the intellect. Decency, haya. When we talk about decency or haya, is it always a good attribute? You know, that shame, shyness, decency, modesty. Is it always a good trait? No. Can you give me an example in which haya could be negative, could be uncalled for?
Yeah.
Yes. Someone give us an example.
Well, it'll be negative if you when you see something is wrong, and then because of the haya, you stop saying anything.
Very good example. You see something wrong in front of you, an act of injustice, an act of corruption. And you say, you know what, I just want to be decent and let me not say anything, let me not get involved. Is this good haya or bad haya? That's bad haya. So you can't always say that decency is good. Or let's say sometimes you want to learn. You know, sometimes a child that is shy, reserved, has that haya, and they don't, you know, they don't have that courage to come out and say, ask, to learn, ask your teacher, ask the parents. Or some of us, sometimes we need to know certain things, but we have haya. We have that inhibition where we're shy to go and ask and find out about the truth. Is that good haya or bad haya? That's bad haya. So while haya is usually a good feature, it's a good characteristic in the human being, but that's not always the case. Haya could be negative. So that's why Adam didn't choose it. Because he knows that haya on its own can't fully guide you. Sometimes haya could be the cause where you stop defending your faith, stop defending the truth. Let's look at deen, devotion, where you have that commitment and you have that devotion to worship God. To do that, you know, thing which you think is good. Is that always good, that devotion? Is that always a good trait or no? Why? Give us an example of a negative deen, negative devotion. Just look at today what's happening in the Middle East. ISIS. ISIS, are they religious people or no? They're very religious. They're very devoted, right? But what's wrong with them?
There's no aql, there's no intellect.
What's their problem? They're devoted. Some of them memorize the Quran. They're trying to pray. They're trying to establish an Islamic state. Now, some of them may be crooks, okay? They're just there for their own benefits, either through money or politics. But some of them they really think they're worshiping God. We have another example in early Islam. Those who fought Imam Ali alayhi salam, who were they? The Khawarij, the Kharijis. The Kharijis, in one hadith, the Imam alayhi salam describes them. He says some of them, when you see how they pray from the outside, their salah makes you feel embarrassed of your own salah. Who? The Kharijis. That's how they would pray, read the Quran. From the outside, beautiful. But what happened to them? They started these wars. They were deviants. And they fought the Imam of their time. And the Prophet had warned about them. So Kharijis have devotion. ISIS has devotion.
They just have a deviant devotion.
They have a deviant devotion. So devotion can be good, but it can also be bad. When you don't have the proper vision, the proper aql, the proper understanding, devotion can go the other way, right? Look at Wahhabism today. Wahhabis have a lot of devotion, some of them. But is that good devotion or bad devotion? It's a bad type of devotion. So that's why Adam alayhi salam, he did not choose deen on itself. He did not choose just devotion because he knew that devotion could go the other way. He chose the aql, the intellect. What keeps your haya and deen in check is the intellect. What is it, that power that tells you when is haya good and when is it bad? It's the intellect, the aql. That power to be able to distinguish the right from the wrong. What is that power that tells you devotion here is good and here it's not good? It's the aql. It's the power of the intellect. It's that vision that a human being has, that intellectual capacity, that you know what is right and what is wrong. So Adam chose the aql, the intellect, and those two stayed. Because the intellect always has haya with it. The intellect always has good devotion with it. Any questions about this? When you think of aql and these three, what comes to your mind?
There's another way of looking intellect encompasses decency and devotion?
The intellect encompasses these three, yes, absolutely. Part of the intellect is decency, and part of it is devotion. But good decency and good devotion. Not absolute decency, not absolute devotion. Because absolute decency, sometimes could make you lose sight of the truth. Absolute devotion, unconditional devotion is also not good. Devotion has to be conditional. Decency has to be conditional. Now, what is that power that shows you when decency is good and when devotion is good? It's the intellect. And this is what people like ISIS lack. They never sit and critically think about what they're doing, who's teaching them what is the source of what they've been told. They don't question that. Like parrots, they sit there getting brainwashed. They are told by their superiors, so-and-so people are kafir, they're this, they're that, the Prophet is waiting for you to have dinner with him tonight, and Hur al-Ain are waiting. He doesn't question, okay, show me. Which hadith says that? What is the proof? He's just devoted and he's got that motivation and he's going there to fight. Without intellect, without critically thinking, objectively thinking about what he's been told. And this is a common theme in the Quran. When the Quran talks about the intellect, the Quran says, you people in your society, don't just grow up because your parents, because your society tells you something, blindly follow it. Think, critically think. Question everything you've been told, even as a Muslim. Question. Because as they say in philosophy, the door to knowledge is doubt. When you question something and then you investigate, you research, you arrive at what? At yaqeen and certainty. That's a true Muslim, the one who's researched what he believes in. So these people, they haven't really researched this. Just like parrots, puppets, they get brainwashed and they go with devotion. That's what would happen with the Khawarij as well. Allah doesn't want this from us. Allah says the basis of your religion is aql, the intellect. You have to rationalize every single thing you're told. When it comes to the core beliefs, rationalize it. Ask for the proofs. That's why in the Shia school of thought, there is no question that you're not allowed to ask. No question. Go to any qualified scholar in the seminary, ask them anything you want. Challenge them with anything you want. You will not find a qualified scholar who will tell you, no, don't open this door. Don't think about that. Just believe, just accept. You'll find that in every other religion. There are some points where you're told, just have faith. Just believe in that. I once was having an interesting, respectful debate with a Christian in Canada. He had graduated from a seminary, and I asked him about the Trinity. I told him, look, I'm not here to, debate you or question you. I really want to understand the Trinity because it's not that clear. The Father, the Son, the Ghost, the Holy Spirit, that relationship is not that clear to me. Is Jesus God in a different form? Is He the Son of God, literally? What about the Spirit? Are they one God? Are they three? When Jesus would pray to the Father, was He praying to Himself or to something different? Are they the same or different? I asked him, I really want to know. He laughed, he thought for a while, he's like, look, this is a very difficult subject, and I've asked, Christian scholars who are more knowledgeable than me. It's complex and it's not that clear, and he just, beat around the bush. I told him, I'm sincerely asking you, don't you think that this core belief you should think rationally about it? How does that work? Is it one? Is it three? Jesus, He clearly prayed to the Father, so He prayed to something else other than His own self. And then I asked him, in your Bible today, is there any verse in which Jesus Himself, don't bring me the words of Paul, Jesus Himself told the people, pray to me? Or did he say, pray to the Father? He thought for a while and he said, no. He commands us in the Bible to pray to the Father. He never said, pray to me. I told him, think about that. See, it's the aql. The basis for religion is intellect. In Shia Islam, there is no blind faith. There is no blind faith. Everything has to be rationalized. And so this is really the main purpose of this hadith, that everything needs to be rationalized, and everything comes with the aql, with the intellect. No aql, there's no religion. There's no really worshipping Allah. Yes?
So when we're talking about devotion and when we're talking about aql, so is loving the Ahl Bayt also a part of it? Like, are we supposed to rationalize that too? Because sometimes we get people who are like loving them, but they're not following them when it comes to acting upon what they said. They said, no, just loving is enough, or loving is more important than following them, or loving comes first and then comes the action.
So that when we're dealing with such ideas, we have to examine the Quran, the Hadith, and what the Prophet ﷺ says. And the Quran is very clear that the Prophet only asked for one thing, and that's the mawaddah, to love and follow the Ahlul Bayt. Now, naturally, love comes before action, because for you to truly follow someone, right, with submission, with respect, with faith, you have to love them. So naturally, love comes at the first stage. But what completes that love, what demonstrates that this love is true, it's genuine, it's not something that I just claim. Because many of us claim to love God or the Ahlul Bayt or whatever else. But how do you prove that? The actions complete that love. So the love is more important than the action because it's the basis for that action. Just like the belief in God. The belief in God comes first, then you follow the commands of God, right? So the belief itself is more important. And the intellect, yes, does direct us to that. So this is one hadith that we find in the book of Kafi. Let's go to the third hadith, tradition 1.1.3 on page 11. Ahmad ibn Idris is the one who narrates this hadith. Al-Collini takes this hadith from Ahmad ibn Idris. He was reliable. He was one of the teachers of Al-Collini. Who does he narrate it from? An Mohammad ibn Abdul Jabbar. He was a reliable narrator. Now his other title is Ibn Abi as-Sahban. That was one of his titles. So in the books of biography, you will find Ibn Abi as-Sahban more commonly referred to him. So he was reliable. He was one of the companions of Al-Imam al-Hadi and Al-Imam al-Askari, peace be upon them. So he lived at the time of these Imams and he was one of their companions. But he doesn't narrate this hadith directly from the Imams. He narrates this from an ba'dhi ashabina. What does ba'dhi ashabina mean? Look at the translation. It says from one of our fellow Shia. He doesn't give us the name of the person whom he's narrating the hadith from. So, we don't know if that person is reliable or not. He himself is reliable. Ibn Abdul Jabbar is reliable. But who does he narrate from? It's anonymous. We don't know. So therefore, as a first step, I can't confirm that this hadith, the sanad, the chain is reliable because I don't know who's in the chain. Now, why is it that sometimes some narrators would do this? They would not tell you the source. It could be several reasons. One was for security purposes, because they were living at a time in which the Shia were persecuted and the government was very sensitive. Who's spreading the teachings of Ahlul Bayt? So if Ibn Abdul Jabbar would tell us who he heard it from, they could go after that person and persecute him. So he keeps it anonymous. Or sometimes he forgets. You've heard a hadith, right? You've even documented it. But then maybe the papers got mixed up or your memory doesn't help you. You don't know exactly from which narrator you got it, but you know it's from a trusted source. Like some of the companions, sometimes they would narrate a hadith. like Zurara, Muhammad ibn Muslim, he does that a lot. He was a companion of Al-Imam al-Baqer and Al-Imam al-Sadiq. Sometimes he doesn't remember exactly which Imam he heard it from. He knows it's from the Imam, but he's just not sure which Imam, because he's narrating this after 10 years, let's say, and he's forgotten. So these are some reasons why the names you will find is anonymous. But at the end of the day, we can't say 100% that the sanad is authentic. This sanad, we cannot verify its reliability. So we have to look at the content and to see if it's correct or not. Any questions about that?
So here we say that since we don't know who he's narrating from, but we know that Muhammad bin Abdul
Jabbar
is reliable. So can't we just rely on that?
Scholars say you can't rely on Muhammad ibn Abdul Jabbar. Why? Because Muhammad ibn Abdul Jabbar, he's not explicitly telling us that the person whom he's narrated from is reliable. He's not. Maybe he was his friend and he happened to be, to depend on him. Maybe he had other clues that this hadith was correct. For me, that's not enough proof. I have to look at the life of that. Maybe I can see something about the life of that narrator that Muhammad ibn Abdul Jabbar did not see. Because these days when you go to people in society and you have friends and relations, right? You could ask so-and-so person, is your brother, is he reliable or not? He says, yeah, he's reliable. Ask another person, he's like, no, he's not that reliable because I saw these things from him. You could have differences of opinion. So when he's not telling us his name, I can't do research about that person.
So just the fact that he's saying that
just the fact that he's narrating is not proof that he is reliable. No, that's not enough proof. We need more proof.
The chain is not clear.
The chain is not clear. It's ambiguous. It's anonymous. We call it majhul. It's anonymous. So he narrates this, رَفَعَهُ إِلَى أَبِي عَبْدِ اللَّهِ. Whoever that narrator was, he attributes this hadith to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. What did the Imam alayhi salam say? قُلْتُ لَهُ, whoever that person is, that anonymous person is, I asked Imam al-Sadiq, مَا الْعَقْلِ, what is the intellect? He said, مَا عُبِدَ بِهِ الرَّحْمَنِ وَاكْتُسِبَ بِهِ الْجِنَانِ. The Imam gives you a very small, beautiful formula. The aql is anything which allows you to worship God correctly and ends you in heaven, takes you to paradise. That's what the aql is. Why? Because worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God created us, we have to worship Him. He has a right on us. The aql directs you to that. And the biggest benefit that a human being can achieve is what? To go to paradise. There is no benefit, there is no reward more than that. So the real aql is that which takes you to paradise. So if you want to describe the aql in a short sentence, it's that which allows you to worship God and takes you to Jannah, takes you to paradise. That's what the aql is. Because the role of the aql is to protect you. When you do your calculations and you're using your intellectual capacities, you want to benefit, right? We human beings, we want to benefit. The greatest benefit is paradise. So anything that prepares you for paradise is the aql. Now this part is interesting. Let's continue. قال قلت, he said, فالذي كان في معاوية. What about Muawiyah? Muawiyah was very smart, shrewd, genius. Did he have the aql too? The Imam alayhi salam told him, تِلْكَ النَّكْرَاء تِلْكَ الشَّيْطَنَ. That was cleverness. A better translation is deception, vice. تِلْكَ الشَّيْطَنَ. Is the word shaytana familiar to you? Shaitan. Shaytana or shaitan comes from the Arabic word shatana. What does shatana mean? Anyone know? When something is far, is distant, you say shatana. Why is the shaitan called that? Because of what he did, God kicked him out of His mercy, so he's far from Allah's mercy. That's the meaning of what? Of shaitan. So he's telling him this is shaytana, this is devilish, satanic powers, what Muawiyah had. It's not really the intellect. تلك النكراء تلك الشيطنة وهي شبيهة بالعقل. The Imam tells him it's similar to the intellect. It's similar to aql وليست بالعقل, but it's not the aql. How do we understand this hadith? See, there are many people in this life, they could be dictators, they could be evildoers, but they're smart, they're intelligent. What's similar between the aql, the intellect, and this evil cleverness is that both of them require an intellectual capacity where you do critical thinking, you do calculations, very delicate calculations. Muawiyah, in every step that he took, he calculated it very well. He was smart, he was a genius. He was a smart ruler. So the Imam says it's similar to the aql, the intellect, in the sense that both of them require delicate, concise calculations where you're critically thinking. You're squeezing your mind to come up with these calculations. You're calculating every move, the consequences of that move. In that sense, they're similar.
How can he have aql and his aql is leading him to Jahannam?
He didn't have aql. He had what's called shaytana, satanic intelligence, let's call it.
Politics? He was a good politician?
Yeah, he was a good politician. But what gives you good politics? That satanic power, right? That satanic intellectual capacity.
I think when the intellect is high and the deen is low, then the shaitanic thing will oversee the aql.
Well, deen, as we explained, is part of the aql, right? The Imam is saying that what's similar between aql and that satanic power, that satanic intelligence, let's call it, is that both of them require that you calculate. You think and you calculate.
But he's calculated.
Right. No. Just, I'll get that. That's how they're similar. So even those who have satanic intelligence, don't think, they're just laid back on their couch not doing anything. No, they're making calculations. They're working hard. They're using their brain. Right? What's different? What's different about them is that the aql allows you to make those calculations that give you as a human being permanent benefit, which is the akhirah. When you calculate your moves based on the akhirah and what Allah wants from you. Whereas the satanic intelligence, you're also making calculations, you're using your brain, but you're looking for your personal temporary benefit of this world. Muawiyah benefited in this world. He was a king, he had the best palaces, he had the best food, the best services, any woman that he wanted. Temporary benefits, right? And he used that satanic intelligence to get those benefits. But what is the thing that he lost? The eternal reward, the eternal punishment. That's why Muawiyah did not have aql. Because he sacrificed the akhirah, the eternal benefit and reward, for a few years in this dunya.
With the verse of Quran, إِنَّا هَدَيْنَاهُ السَّبِيلَ إِمَّا شَاكِرًا أَوْ كَفُورًا. So he could have gone this way or that way.
He chose the path of deviation. Why? Remember, Muawiyah was not dumb. He was smart. He did his calculations. But his problem was his vision. He was short-sighted. All he was concerned about is his desires in this world. And he calculated very well.
Maybe the fear of Allah is low.
And there is no fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously that plays into it as well. Whereas a true mu'min believer, you don't look at this world only and the pleasures of this world and this temporary world. You also examine the benefit of the akhirah as well. That's the most important thing, because everything in this world will leave, expire, but the akhirah is everlasting, it's permanent. So the aql is what allows you to calculate for the akhirah, really. And there are verses about that in the Holy Quran. It's time for salah, so we will conclude. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل